Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'll be talking about AWS ECR. So ECR is a part of AWS ecosystem and it provides seamless integration with other AWS services. It offers scalable and reasonable available storage for Docker images. So basically, it's a kind of registry for your Docker images and where you can store your Docker images. So today we'll be talking about it and we'll be also looking into the hands-on. Let's look into the contents of today's video. So the main contents that we'll be discussing today will be what is AWS ECR, what are the differences between ECR and DockerHub. So DockerHub is also a image registry where you can store your images, Docker images. Then accessing ECR through AWS Console. So this is a hands-on demo that we'll be looking into. We will be using ECR to through AWS Console, and then we will be setting up ECR repository. We will be using AWS CLI, and we will be configuring AWS secrets and access keys, and then we'll be trying to access ECR repository and push the image from our local machine to Docker image from our local machine to the ECR, AWS ECR. So let's get started. This video is going to be really interesting because I will be showing you hands-on demo as well on how you can push the Docker images to ECR. So first thing is what is AWS ECR? So let's look a quick intro about it. So ECR is a fully managed Docker container registry that makes it easy to store, manage and deploy Docker container images. So it seamlessly integrates with other AWS services and provides secure scalable storage for your container images. So basically AWS ECR is used for storing your container Docker container images, and it is a Docker container registry that stores your images both in public and private format. Now let's understand how does it actually works. So basically a developer writes the code. Developer will write the code. The code could be in any language. It could be a Python code or a Spring Boot code or any code. And then the code will be packaged into a Docker image. And we want to push this Docker image to a repository where it could be kept, where it could be shared within organization or outside of organization. So generally the main Docker registry which is being used widely by open source projects and by different kinds of small projects also or big projects also is Docker Hub. However, Amazon also introduced its Docker container registry, which was your ECR. So once the developer writes the code, he creates a Docker image of that code. The Docker image could be pushed on Amazon ECR. So why Amazon ECR? Because it provides a lot of features. It helps you in maintaining your Docker image. It helps you in scanning the image, in image detecting the image vulnerability, in image tagging, image versioning, and it also helps in maintaining the image lifecycle. So that is where we are going to use Amazon ECR, and then Amazon ECR also integrates very well with other AWS services such as ECS, EKS, or any other on premise services as well. So the integration is quite really good. Also, it provides the security aspect. So you can integrate IAM with your ECR in order to make sure that the images that you are keeping on the ECR is quite safe and secure. Now let's discuss the differences between ECR and DockerHub. So both are container registries and both are used for storing and maintaining the container images. But what are the major differences between these two container registries? We'll look into that. So these are some of the points on which we will look what are the differences between each of them. So the first point is access control and security. ECR offers granular access control through AWS IAM, and it prioritizes security with encryption at rest and in transit, along with image scanning for vulnerabilities. Then we have Docker Hub. Docker Hub, it provides basic access control for private repositories, and security measures might be comparatively limited. It lacks the advanced IAM integration and extensive security features of ECR. So ECR is far better off in the security when compared to Docker Hub. Now the next point on which we will see the differentiation between ECR and Docker Hub is on integration. So ECR, it seamlessly integrates with various AWS services like ECS, EKS, CloudFormation and others, and this allows better container management. However, for DockerHub, it is accessible from various platforms such as AWS, but it lacks the depth of integration capabilities within AWS environment if we talk about, and this is something that is being offered by ECR. It integrates well with the AWS services. Now, the third point on which we can differentiate ECR and Docker Hub is storage and performance. So, ECR offers reasonable, available, scalable, and secure storage within the AWS infrastructure. It provides direct access to AWS services, so it is integrated with AWS services. However, Docker Hub, it provides storage for Docker images with varying performance, but may not be optimized for AWS specific services or regions. Now, the fourth distinction can be discussed on the topic of community and accessibility between these two container registries, that is ECR and Docker Hub. So, ECR is primarily focused on enterprise grade solutions. However, Docker Hub is known for its vast community driven sharing of Docker images and applications. It also offers both public and private repositories, and it is more accessible to the individual developers and open source projects. So that is where Docker Hub comes in, and it plays an important role for open source projects as well as for individual contributors. Then we will talk about usability and interface. So ECR, it integrates seamlessly with AWS Management Console, and it provides a familiar interface for AWS users. On the other hand, Docker Hub, it is user-friendly interface but with a straightforward approach. It is accessible to users across different platforms and environments. Now, the next point on which we can discuss the differences between ECR and Docker Hub is cost structure. So, ECR is built within the AWS ecosystem, and ECR's pricing is integrated with other AWS services, following the pay as you go model for storage and data transfer. So basically, it costs you money when you are trying to create private repositories, and it is more based on the pay as you go model, ECR. Whereas Docker Hub, it offers free and paid tiers both for individual and enterprise or team use, and it has different pricing structures based on private repository needs. So that's the main differences between ECR and Docker Hub, and it's a very popular question, DevOps interview questions. What are the differences between ECR and Docker Hub? So in conclusion, we can say that ECR is tailored for AWS centric deployments, and it emphasizes on security integration with AWS ecosystem and enterprise gate solutions. Whereas if we talk about Docker Hub, it is accessible and community driven and may lack the depth of security features and native AWS integration, which is being offered by ECR. So the choice between the two depends on the specific needs of the users. So there could be security requirements and integration preferences. So if your organization is already using AWS, let's say, so in that case, you can prefer using ECR since it provides better integration with AWS services. You can make use of IAM, and you can provide a lot of security and vulnerability scanning of the images as well if you use ECR over there. And then depending on the community collaboration, so if you want a better community collaboration, in that case you can consider using Docker Hub. So these are some of the major differences between Docker Hub and ECR. Now let's deep dive onto the demo part, and let's see how you can push the Docker images on AWS ECR. So we will start with Amazon's console, AWS console, and then we will be creating a repository in ECR. This is my GitHub account. So we will go to AWS projects repository, and over there I have AWS ECR. And in this README, I have mentioned the steps that we will be following today. So we will be installing AWS CLI on the local machine. So I already have it installed, but I will show you how you can also install AWS CLI on your machines. And then you can configure AWS CLI using this command, AWS configure. You can create an AWS. Third step would be creating an AWS ECR repository. Then I'll be showing you how you can get the commands which needs to be executed in order to push the Docker image from your local repository to AWS ECR. Next, we will be checking one of the Dockerize application, and you can push the Docker image on AWS ECR by running few commands, which we will be checking out just in a while. And then once you have pushed the image, we will be seeing how does the image looks in the ECR repository. So let's go to our AWS console. So first of all, what you have to do is in AWS console. So I hope every one of you have an AWS account. So you can do this in AWS free tier as well. So free tier is something that provides few services which can be used within a year by everyone who registers for this AWS account. So let's look into the AWS ECR. So we will search for ECR in the search bar, and then we will click on this service, Elastic Container Registry service, and then we will click on this button, Get Started, which is just below Create a Repository. We'll click on Create Repository, and then these are the visibility settings. And now we are going to create a new repository. So let's say I create a private repository and I name it as Spring Boot Repo. So that is a repository name. And then we are not going to make any changes to the default settings. We are just going to leave it as it is. However, there are certain settings which could be looked into, like image scanning settings are there. So you can select these settings if you want to enable the scan on push. So whenever you are pushing the image, there will be an image scanning that will be done. Then you can check on the encryption settings as well. So KMS encryption, that is AWS Key Management Service, is can be used to encrypt images stored in this repository. So instead of using default encryption settings, AWS KMS services could also be used. So once you have given the name of your repo which you want to create, we will click on Create Repository button. So now our repository is being created. You can see that this is the repository. Now let me show you how you can install AWS CLI. So you need to install that on your local, and then you can run the commands which will help us in pushing the Docker image to this particular repository. So let's go over here and see. So as of now, there are no images that are present in this repository. However, we will be pushing some Docker images to this ECR repository. Let us search for AWS CLI over here, and we want to install the AWS command line interface on our local so that we can interact with the ECR repository as well as the other services that we want to interact through command line interface. So there are the three operating system options which I mentioned over here. So let's say if you have Windows, what you have to do is you have to download this particular MSI, and once you download this particular MSI, you just have to run that particular uh, MSI, and it will help you in installing AWS CLI. And once you have installed AWS CLI, you can check like what is the version of AWS CLI that is being installed on your local. So you can check that by using the command AWS minus minus version. So it says that this is being installed on my local. 2.15.2 is something that is installed on my local. So once you have installed on Windows, the other option is you can check for Linux as well, how you can install on Linux. So they have given the steps quite nicely. So you can see that to install the AWS CLI, run the following commands in your Linux environment, and to update your current installation you have to run this particular command. And then in order to download, and you will be unzipping this particular AWS CLI v2.zip. Once that is being done, you have to use this particular command in order to install AWS on your Linux machine. So that is how you install AWS on your Linux machine. So once this is being done, you have installed AWS on the desired machine where you are currently working. On the Mac OS, you can use GUI in order to install the AWS CLI. Once you have installed it, we will be connecting our AWS CLI the to our AWS console, and for that we will be using the command AWS configure. And once we use this command, it will ask us few information, like it will ask us to provide the access key, it will ask us to provide the secret access key, and it will also ask us to provide the default region name, and it will also ask us to provide the default output format which you want to see. So for me, I have kept it as JSON, and default region name I have given as US East 1. And once that is being done, it will connect you to the AWS console. So let me show you how you can also create a secret access key and an access key ID in order to connect to your AWS console through your AWS CLI. Go to our AWS console and we will search for IAM. So IAM is a service which helps you in creating new users, creating of security credentials, access credentials, and all those things. So I've also created a dedicated video on how you can create users, roles, policies in IAM. So you can go and check out that video as well. So let's go ahead and create a new user. So let's click on create user button, and let's give this user as demo user, the name of this particular user, demo user, and we will click on next. So let's say we want to attach policies directly to this particular user, and I want to give this particular user administrative access policy. So I will go and I will give this user administrative access, and then I will click on next. And let's say I don't want to create any tag associated to this particular user, I will click on create user. So it is that simple to create a new user in IAM in AWS. So once you have created this new user, what you can do is you can create an access key. So we will be using this access key in order to access the AWS from our AWS CLI. So when our AWS CLI, which is installed on our local, it has to interact with the AWS console. There has to be a certain security mechanism or a way in which AWS can authenticate that the request that is coming from the user, it is correct or not. So in order to authenticate that request, we are creating this access key and secret key. So let's say you select command line interface over here, and you select I understand the above recommendation and want to proceed to create an access key, and then we will click on next. Then let's say I give the tag as demo tag, and then we will click on create access key. So this will create my access key, and it will also create a CSV file. So it will allow you to download these credentials, access key ID and secret access key, which it has created, and it will say download.csv. So make sure that you download the CSV so that you have your credentials, access key and secret access key stored somewhere, and you don't have to create it once again. And then you can click on done. So once you have clicked on done, you have created access keys, and you can see that those access keys are present over here inside the user. You go inside the user that we created, demo user, and then you go inside security credentials, and inside security credentials you can see that access keys are being created over here, and the status of this access key is active currently. And basically you can deactivate the key if you are not using it, or you can delete the key as well, because this is something an authentication mechanism or an access key which allows any machine to access to your AWS console and do different kinds of things with your services that are present on your AWS. So you can keep this, so these access keys should be kept secret, or they should be deactivated if you are not using these access keys. So let's say our access key is active now. Now we are going to authenticate. So we installed AWS CLI. I've shown you how you can download and install AWS CLI. We will go to our command line, and we will once again check the version. So this shows that AWS CLI is being installed. Next we are going to type is AWS configure. This command will help us in configuring our access key, secret key, and the region in which you want to configure, as well as you have to give the output format. So you will click on enter, then it will ask you to enter the access key ID. So let's say you enter this access key ID, and then it will ask you to enter secret access key. So let's say you enter another secret access key, the access key that you just downloaded. So you can go to your downloads and you can get that secret access key, and you enter that and you hit enter, and then you have to enter the default region. So you will enter the default region, and then you have to enter the output format in order to configure, and then you will hit enter. So that is how you are going to authenticate the user, and you are going to make sure that you are able to access the AWS services from your local machine. So I'll pause the video here, and I will go back and configure correctly for the user that I'm using currently. This was just to show you a demo part of how you can configure your AWS access keys and secret keys. Now we have configured the IAM access keys and secret keys with in our local also. So next thing that we can do is you can check one of my project and you can clone that project. It is a Dockerize Spring Boot application. So this project can be cloned, and then we are going to push this particular Docker image of this project on our AWS ECR. So you can clone this repository and then you can make use of it. So in a while I will show you how you can push it to ECR. So the next thing is, like, if I go to Spring Boot repo and I select this particular repository, then you can see that over here there is a button with name view push buttons. We will click on it. View push commands, we'll click on it, and we are going to use these particular commands in order to push our image to the ECR repository. So the first command is, what it does is it retrieves an authentication token and authenticates your Docker client to your registry. So that is what this particular command does. Then the next thing is it builds your Docker image. So we are going to use this particular command. Then the third command is, after the build completes, tag your image. So you're going to tag your image using this command. So you can push the image to the repository and then run the following command to push the image to the newly created AWS repository. So let's run these commands and see how it looks. This is my location where I have kept the project. So we will open the command line from this location, and then we will run the commands that are mentioned in our push on commands. So let's copy this command and let's try running this command. So I have copy pasted that command and I will hit enter over here. So this will, so this, there is an error. So it says that this error may indicate that the Docker daemon is not running. So we have to make sure that Docker is installed on our local, and Docker is always is running when we are running this particular command. So let me start Docker. So I have just started Docker, and let's see if it runs. Then we can run these commands. So it takes a few seconds to initialize the Docker engine and Docker in my local. So you can see that it says starting the Docker engine. So I have installed Docker desktop. Docker setup is being done on my local. Let's run this command once again and see. So it says login succeeded. So the Docker is also running in my local. So it says Docker desktop running. You can see the small icon here which says that the Docker desktop is running, Docker daemon is running on the background. Now the next command that we are going to copy is docker build -t spring boot repo dot. So we copied this command. So this will build our Docker image. So let's run this particular command. So it is building the image. You can see that it is building the image, all the layers and everything. And once this is being built, we will run the third command, docker tag, in order to tag our image so that we can push it to the repo. So we will run the third command. Just copy the commands. Let's copy the command once again. Then we will hit enter. So this is tag the image. Now let's push the image to our AWS ECR. We copied the command and we are going to push the image. So let's see, it is pushing the image currently, and that is what it says, that it is pushing the image. So once this image is pushed on our AWS ECR repository, we can see that it contains the image, and there will be this image that will be placed over there. So it takes few seconds to push it to AWS ECR. As you can see that the image is being completely pushed on AWS ECR. We will go back and now check that whether the image is present on AWS ECR repo or not. Okay, so we used all these commands in order to push the image to ECR repository. Let's go into our ECR repository, and you can see that the image has been pushed on this particular location, and the image is present on this particular in this ECR repository that we just created. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video and it was informative for you. So if you liked the video and the content, please consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you. Bye bye.